The champagne glass trembled slightly in Elaine's hand as she finally gathered the courage to ask the question that had been haunting her for weeks. At 47, she had built an empire, but standing before this 35-year-old single father, she felt like a nervous teenager again. His answer would change everything between them, and it did, in ways neither could have imagined. If you're wondering what happens next in this unexpected love story between a powerful CEO and a devoted single dad, stay with me. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming stories that challenge our assumptions about love, age, and second chances. Elaine Mercer stood at the edge of the crowded charity gala, observing the room with the practiced eye of someone who had spent decades in boardrooms reading people. As the CEO of Meridian Technologies, she had mastered the art of commanding attention without seeking it. Tonight, however, her usual confidence felt like a thin veneer over something more vulnerable. Her company had just donated a substantial sum to the Children's Education Foundation, which was why she found herself at this event, nursing a glass of champagne and making obligatory small talk. But her mind kept drifting to him, Daniel Foster, the foundation's newest board member and the man who had somehow managed to crack through her carefully constructed walls over the past few months of their professional relationship. Daniel stood across the room, engaged in animated conversation with a small group. Even from a distance, Elaine could see the warmth in his eyes, the genuine way he listened to others. Unlike many men she'd encountered throughout her career, he seemed completely comfortable with her success, never intimidated by her position or wealth. What had started as routine meetings about the foundation had gradually evolved into something more personal. Coffee discussions about donation allocations had drifted into conversations about books they both loved. Emails about fundraising strategies now included links to articles they thought might interest each other. There was an undeniable connection between them, but Elaine had been hesitant to acknowledge it as anything more than friendship. The 12-year age gap between them felt like an insurmountable obstacle. In her experience, men typically preferred younger women, especially men like Daniel who still had the option to start a family. At 47, Elaine had long ago made peace with the fact that her career had come at the cost of traditional family life. She had no regrets about her choices, but meeting Daniel had awakened possibilities she thought she'd put to rest. As if sensing her thoughts, Daniel looked up and caught her eye across the room. He smiled, that genuine, unguarded smile that always made her heart beat a little faster, and excused himself from his group to make his way toward her. "You look like you could use a rescue," he said as he approached, his voice carrying that slight hint of teasing that had become familiar between them. Elaine laughed, grateful for the interruption to her spiraling thoughts. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who's been watching you," Daniel replied, then seemed to catch himself, a slight flush coloring his cheeks. "I mean, these events can be exhausting, even for someone as skilled at networking as you are. Especially when you're the one everyone wants to talk to about donations," she said. "How are you holding up? This must be quite different from your usual evenings." Daniel's life as a single father to 8-year-old Emma had come up frequently in their conversations. After his wife died from cancer 4 years ago, he had rebuilt his life around his daughter, scaling back his architecture career to be more present for her. "Emma's with my sister tonight, probably convincing her to let her stay up way past bedtime," he said with a fond smile. "But honestly, I'm enjoying myself more than I expected to. The foundation does incredible work." "They do," Elaine agreed. "And they're lucky to have you on the board. Your perspective as both a parent and someone who benefited from similar programs as a child brings something valuable to the table." Daniel had grown up in foster care after losing his parents in a car accident when he was 10. The educational support programs he'd received had changed the trajectory of his life, which was why he was so passionate about the foundation's mission. "Speaking of perspectives," Daniel said, glancing around the crowded room, "would you like to step outside for a moment? The terrace is quiet, and I could use some fresh air." Elaine hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Lead the way." The night air was cool and refreshing after the stuffiness of the ballroom. The terrace overlooked the city skyline, lights twinkling against the darkness like earthbound stars. For a moment, they stood in comfortable silence, both leaning against the stone balustrade. "You know," Daniel finally said, "I've been wanting to talk to you about something, but I can never seem to find the right moment." Elaine felt her pulse quicken. "What about?" He turned to face her, his expression serious but gentle. "I think you know that I value our friendship enormously, Elaine. The way we connect, the conversations we have, they've become important to me." "They've become important to me too," she admitted, her voice softer than usual. "I've been wondering if—" He paused, seeming to search for the right words. "If you might be open to exploring whether there could be something more between us." The moment hung between them, fragile and weighted with possibility. Elaine felt a surge of hope quickly followed by the familiar doubts that had plagued her for weeks. "Daniel, she began, then stopped, gathering her courage. "Before you say anything else, there's something we need to address. I'm 12 years older than you." He looked at her with a slight furrow in his brow, as if trying to understand why she was stating this obvious fact. "I know how old you are, Elaine." "Is my age a problem?" she whispered, hating the vulnerability in her voice but needing to know. Daniel's expression shifted from confusion to understanding, and then, unexpectedly, to something that looked almost like amusement. His reply, when it came, shocked her. "Elaine, I lost my wife when we were both 31. I've spent the last 4 years raising our daughter alone and rebuilding what it means to be happy. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that life is too short and too unpredictable to let arbitrary numbers dictate who we allow ourselves to care about." He took a step closer to her. "The only problem I see is that we've wasted weeks dancing around this instead of being honest about how we feel." Elaine felt something tight in her chest begin to loosen. "And how do you feel?" "Like I've found someone extraordinary who makes me laugh, challenges my thinking, and somehow understands both the architect and the dad in me. Someone I can't stop thinking about." He reached out slowly and took her hand. "The question isn't whether your age is a problem for me. It's whether my situation, being a single father with all the complications that brings, is a problem for you." The irony wasn't lost on Elaine. All this time, she'd been worrying about being too old for him, while he'd been concerned about the responsibilities that came with his daughter. "Emma is part of who you are," she said. "And from everything you've told me about her, she sounds like a remarkable little girl." "That's not a complication, Daniel. It's just life." His smile then was like sunrise breaking through clouds. "So where does that leave us?" "I think," Elaine said, feeling more certain with each word, "it leaves us at the beginning of something we both want to explore." That conversation on the terrace marked the beginning of a relationship neither Elaine nor Daniel had anticipated finding at this stage in their lives. But the path forward wasn't without its challenges. The first came from within Elaine's own company. Though she had never cared much for office gossip, she couldn't ignore the whispers that followed when news of her relationship with Daniel became public. Some executives, particularly older men who had known her for years, seemed personally affronted by her choice, as if her dating a younger man somehow diminished her authority. "I don't understand why it's anyone's business," she confided to her longtime friend and CFO, Margaret, after overhearing particularly cutting remarks from a board member. "If Daniel were 20 years older than me, no one would bat an eye." Margaret, who had stood by Elaine through the building of their company from a small startup to a tech giant, shook her head sympathetically. "It's the double standard we've always faced. Men are congratulated for dating younger women, it's seen as proof of their success. When women do the reverse, it challenges the natural order of things." She made air quotes around the last phrase, her disdain evident. "I've never let other people's opinions dictate my business decisions," Elaine said firmly. "I'm certainly not going to let them dictate my personal life." But the criticism stung more than she wanted to admit, especially when it came from people whose respect she had earned through decades of hard work and brilliant strategy. For Daniel, the challenges were different but equally complex. As an architect whose firm specialized in sustainable community projects, his professional circle was generally more progressive. Few colleagues commented directly on the age difference between him and Elaine. Instead, his hurdle centered around integrating a new relationship into his life as a single parent. Emma, bright and perceptive beyond her 8 years, had grown accustomed to having her father's undivided attention when they were together. The first time Elaine joined them for dinner at their home, Emma had been polite but reserved, studying this newcomer with cautious eyes. "Do you have any kids?" Emma had asked bluntly over dessert. "No, I don't," Elaine answered honestly. "Why not? Don't you like kids?" Daniel had started to intervene, but Elaine gently shook her head at him. This was an important question, and Emma deserved a thoughtful answer. "I do like kids," Elaine said. "When I was younger, I was very focused on building my company. That took most of my time and energy, and I made choices that led me down a different path than parenthood. Sometimes I wonder what it would have been like to have children, but I don't regret the life I've built." Emma considered this, spoon hovering over her ice cream. "So you're not trying to be my mom?" The directness of the question caught Elaine off guard, but she appreciated the child's honesty. "No, Emma. You had a mom who loved you very much, and no one could ever replace her. I'm just someone who cares about your dad and would like to get to know you better, if that's okay with you." After a moment of serious consideration, Emma had nodded. "I guess that's okay. Do you know how to play Minecraft?" The question had made both adults laugh, breaking the tension. "I don't," Elaine admitted, "but I'm a quick learner if you're willing to teach me." That evening had been the first step in building a relationship with Emma, a process that Elaine approached with patience and respect, never trying to force a connection but allowing it to develop naturally. There were awkward moments and occasional resistance, but also surprising instances of connection, like when Emma proudly showed Elaine her science project or asked for help with a difficult math problem. Beyond these personal challenges, Elaine and Daniel also faced the more mundane but equally significant hurdles of merging two established adult lives. His modest craftsman home in a family-friendly neighborhood was worlds away from her sleek downtown penthouse. His schedule revolved around school drop-offs, soccer practices, and bedtime routines, while hers often included early morning international calls and late evening business dinners. "I feel like we're trying to solve a particularly complex equation," Daniel joked one evening as they compared calendars, trying to find time for a weekend away together. "Too many variables." "Good thing I've always enjoyed a challenge," Elaine replied, leaning over to kiss him. "And this one is definitely worth solving." 6 months into their relationship, they had established a rhythm that worked for them. Elaine joined Daniel and Emma for dinner twice a week and often spent weekend days with them, participating in family activities that gave her glimpses into a life very different from her own. Daniel occasionally accompanied Elaine to business events, where his genuine interest in people and natural charm made him a welcome presence. They were careful to carve out time just for themselves as well, quiet dinners where they could talk without interruption, mornings spent lingering over coffee and the newspaper, evenings at the symphony or theater. In these moments, the age difference between them seemed to disappear entirely, replaced by the simple pleasure of two people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. But the outside world had a way of intruding on their carefully constructed balance. The most painful reminder came at a parent-teacher conference at Emma's school, which Elaine attended at both Daniel and Emma's request. As they waited in the hallway outside the classroom, another mother approached them, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "You must be Emma's grandmother," she said to Elaine. "It's so nice of you to come to these things. My mother would never bother." Before Elaine could respond, Emma piped up from where she had been sitting between them. "She's not my grandmother. She's my dad's girlfriend. And she's the CEO of a huge company, so you should probably get your facts straight." The woman's face had flushed red with embarrassment as she stammered an apology and quickly moved away. Daniel had squeezed Elaine's hand supportively, but she could see the concern in his eyes, wondering how the comment had affected her. Later that night, after Emma was asleep, they sat on Daniel's porch swing, a blanket draped over their laps against the autumn chill. "I'm sorry about what happened today," Daniel said quietly. "It's not your fault," Elaine replied. "And honestly, it's not the first time something like that has happened. It probably won't be the last. Does it bother you?" Elaine considered the question carefully. "In the moment, yes. It stings. But then I remember that strangers' perceptions don't define what we have." She turned to look at him directly. "What about you? Does it bother you when people make assumptions or judgments about us?" Daniel was silent for a long moment, the swing creaking gently beneath them. "What bothers me," he finally said, "is the thought that those comments might eventually wear you down. That one day you might decide this is all too complicated, too much work, and walk away." The vulnerability in his admission touched her deeply. This strong, capable man who had rebuilt his life after devastating loss was afraid of losing her, not because of their age difference, but because of how the world responded to it. "Daniel," she said, taking his face in her hands, "I've spent my entire career being underestimated and judged. If I had let other people's opinions stop me, I would never have built Meridian. I certainly wouldn't have become CEO in an industry dominated by men 20 years my senior." She smiled at him, feeling a certainty that had been growing steadily over the months they'd been together. "What we have is worth fighting for. I'm not going anywhere." The relief in his eyes was palpable, and when he kissed her, it felt like a promise. 1 year after that fateful conversation on the terrace, Elaine found herself back at the annual charity gala for the Children's Education Foundation. This time, however, she arrived with Daniel by her side, their fingers intertwined as they made their way through the crowd. The year had brought changes for both of them. Elaine had begun the process of restructuring Meridian's leadership, promoting younger executives with fresh perspectives while creating a more sustainable work-life balance for herself. Daniel's architecture firm had taken on several high-profile sustainable housing projects, his reputation growing in the field he was passionate about. But the most significant changes had been personal. 3 months ago, Daniel and Emma had moved into Elaine's penthouse, which had been renovated to include a bedroom for Emma decorated to her specifications, heavy on purple and space themes, and a home office for Daniel. The adjustment to living together had come with its challenges, but also with a deepening of their connection as a family unit. As they circulated through the gala, Elaine was struck by how different this night felt compared to the previous year. Where once she had stood alone, uncertain and conflicted, now she moved through the room with a sense of completeness she hadn't known was missing from her life. "Penny for your thoughts," Daniel murmured as they paused near the bar. "I was just thinking about how much has changed since last year," she replied. "How much I've changed. For the better, I hope." "Definitely for the better." She smiled up at him. "You and Emma have brought something into my life that I didn't even know I was missing." Daniel's expression softened. "You've done the same for us. Emma told me yesterday that she thinks you're the coolest grown-up she knows, which from an 8-year-old is high praise indeed." Elaine laughed, warmth spreading through her chest at the thought of the little girl who had become so dear to her. "I'll take that compliment. Though I think her opinion might be influenced by the fact that I let her stay up late watching that science documentary last weekend." "It wasn't just that," Daniel said. "She said you listen to her like what she says matters. That's something she notices." Before Elaine could respond, they were interrupted by the foundation's director announcing that dinner would be